The station was a labyrinth of activity, bustling with beings from countless worlds. Yet, amidst the vibrant chaos, she felt invisible. Her name was Lyra, though no one ever used it. Among her kind, individuality was secondary to duty, and names were seldom spoken aloud. She stood near a viewport, staring out at the ships docking and departing, their engines painting faint trails of light against the void. The cold metal walls of the station mirrored her feelings, sterile, unyielding, empty. Lyra was an ambassador in training, a role of immense honor among her people. Her species, the Altherans, valued logic and stoicism above all else. Emotions were seen as primitive and indulgent. It was her responsibility to observe and report on the behaviors of other species, cataloging their strengths and flaws for the benefit of Altheran diplomacy. Yet, as the weeks on the station dragged on, she found herself longing for connection, a longing that shamed her deeply. She pulled her hood tighter around her face, an instinctive reaction whenever she felt exposed. The promenade was loud, filled with laughter and the hum of traders haggling in a dozen languages. She avoided their eyes, her gaze instead drifting to a commotion near the cargo bay. A towering figure, unmistakably human, was at the center of it. He was hard to miss. Broad-shouldered, with a rugged face framed by unkempt hair, the human exuded a presence that demanded attention. His uniform, scuffed and patched, hinted at a life of conflict. The station's rumor mill buzzed with tales of his exploits, violent skirmishes, mercenary contracts, and a past soaked in blood. The Altherans refer to humans as chaotic predators, their unpredictable nature a source of both fascination and fear. This one seemed to embody every stereotype. Lyra watched as he bent down, lifting a small child, an insectoid creature, off the ground. The child had tripped, spilling a bundle of goods across the floor. The human crouched, gathering the items and handing them back with surprising gentleness. The child's antennae twitched in gratitude, and the human ruffled its head before walking away. It was an odd contradiction. Lyra had been taught that humans were dangerous, but his actions didn't align with the stories. Still, she reminded herself that appearances could be deceiving. Her duty was to remain objective. She turned away, trying to refocus on her report. Later that day, Lyra found herself at a small observation lounge. It was one of the few quiet places on the station, a haven where she could think without interruption. She was engrossed in her datapad when a shadow fell across her. Looking up, she froze. The human stood there, a steaming cup in his hand. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. She hesitated, her training warning her against unnecessary interaction. But her curiosity won out, and she nodded. He slid into the seat across from her, setting the cup down. "Name's Cole," he said. "Figured I'd take a break from all the noise out there." Lyra didn't respond immediately. She studied him, searching for any sign of threat. His posture was relaxed, his eyes scanning the stars beyond the viewport. He seemed tired, as though the weight of countless battles rested on his shoulders. Finally, she spoke. "Why are you here?" Cole raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Straight to the point, huh? I like that. Well, I'm here on a short-term contract. Security detail. Not exactly glamorous, but it pays the bills." She tilted her head. "Your reputation suggests you enjoy violence." His smirk faded. "Reputation's a funny thing.
People see what they want to see."
Sure, I've done things I'm not proud of. Sometimes, survival doesn't leave room for pretty choices. There was an honesty in his tone that caught her off guard. She had expected bravado or deflection, not this quiet admission. Before she could ask more, he leaned back, arms crossed. "What about you? Don't think I've seen your kind around much." "I am Altheran," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "We are observers, chroniclers. Our role is to study and learn."
Cole nodded.
"Sounds lonely." The comment hit harder than she expected. She stiffened, the mask of detachment slipping into place. "We do not require companionship." He gave her a long, searching look but didn't press further. Instead, he stood, picking up his cup. "Well, I'll leave you to it. Nice meeting you, though. As he walked away, Lyra felt an unfamiliar pang in her chest. She dismissed it as a fleeting anomaly, a distraction from her duties. Yet, as she watched him disappear into the crowd, a question lingered in her mind. Could the tales of human chaos be wrong? The next time Lyra saw Cole, he was seated in the bustling promenade, repairing what looked like a damaged personal device. His hands were steady, calloused fingers working with practiced precision. She hesitated, torn between her duties and an inexplicable urge to understand him better. Finally, she approached, her steps cautious but deliberate.
Cole noticed her before she could speak.
Back for round two, he asked with a faint grin, not looking up from his work. I have questions, she said, standing stiffly. Figured as much, he replied, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. She sat, her posture rigid. Your people are unpredictable, she began, choosing her words carefully. We have observed your capacity for both creation and destruction. It is difficult to reconcile. Cole set his work down and leaned back. We're a mixed bag, I'll give you that. But it's not as simple as good or bad. People make choices, and sometimes the line between the two gets blurry. Lyra studied him, his words challenging her understanding of human nature. Do you regret the choices you've made? His eyes darkened, and for a moment, the faint grin disappeared. Yeah, some of them. But regret doesn't change the past. All you can do is try to do better moving forward. The honesty in his answer unsettled her. Altherans didn't dwell on past mistakes. They learned and adapted. Yet, there was something deeply human about carrying the weight of one's actions. Why did you choose to speak to me? She asked, her voice softer now. Cole shrugged. You looked like you needed it. The simplicity of his answer caught her off guard. She was accustomed to complex motives and strategic thinking, but this was something else entirely. Humans often act without logic, she said, almost to herself. Yet, you claim to seek connection. He chuckled. We're wired that way, I guess. No matter how tough the world gets, most of us still want to belong. That's why we've got things like holidays, traditions. Keeps us grounded. Lyra tilted her head. Holidays? Yeah, Cole said, leaning forward. Like Christmas. It's about family, giving, and togetherness. Even out here, far from Earth, people try to keep it alive. You've probably seen the decorations around the station. She nodded, recalling the colorful lights and trinkets that seemed so out of place amidst the station's utilitarian design. It seems unnecessary. To you, maybe, he said. But to us, it's a reminder. A way to hold on to something good. Lyra considered his words, her mind racing with questions. The concept of celebrating in the face of adversity was foreign to her. Among her people, joy was a fleeting indulgence, not a pillar of existence. As they talked, Cole's demeanor shifted. He spoke less of himself and more about humanity's quirks, how they found beauty in imperfection, how they valued the intangible. Lyra listened intently, her curiosity overriding her reservations. At one point, she noticed him glance toward the market stalls lining the promenade. See anything you like? He asked, catching her gaze. She hesitated, unsure how to respond. I do not desire material possessions. Not what I asked, he said with a wink. Reluctantly, she admitted, the lights are intriguing. They remind me of the luminescent plants on my homeworld. Cole smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression. That's the thing about beauty. It sneaks up on you when you least expect it. Their conversation continued, touching on topics as diverse as the stars outside and the music playing faintly in the background. Lyra found herself drawn to his perspective, even as it challenged everything she had been taught. When they finally parted ways, she felt a strange sense of loss. Cole's words lingered in her mind, a quiet hum of possibilities she couldn't ignore. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder if there was more to life than observation and duty. The station was quieter than usual when Lyra arrived at her observation post. The festive atmosphere that had permeated the halls seemed dampened by an undercurrent of tension. Conversations in hushed tones carried snippets of alarming news, a theft in the marketplace, an altercation near the cargo bays. She spotted Cole not far from her vantage point, speaking with a group of station security personnel. His posture was stiff, his expression grim. One of the officers gestured toward him, their voices too low for her to hear, but the accusatory tone was clear. "Do you see now?" came a voice beside her. Lyra turned to find her superior, Saran, standing with hands clasped behind his back. His gaze followed hers to Cole. "I see only speculation," she replied, unwilling to leap to conclusions. Saran's tone was sharp. "The human's reputation is well documented. Violence and chaos follow his kind, and this one is no different. I warned you against fraternizing with him. It is unbecoming of an Althorn ambassador." Lyra stiffened, but did not respond. She watched as Cole walked away from the security officers, his movements tight with frustration. Saran continued, his voice a cold murmur. "You risk compromising your objectivity. Distance yourself before it is too late." As her superior departed, Lyra's mind churned with conflicting thoughts. The rumors surrounding Cole aligned too neatly with the preconceptions she had been taught. Yet her interactions with him painted a far more complex picture. Later, she found him seated alone in a dim corner of the station's maintenance deck, a half-empty bottle beside him. His face was shadowed, but there was no mistaking the weariness in his posture. "You look like you've been through a battle," she said, stepping closer. He glanced up, the faintest smirk breaking through his fatigue. "Not the kind you're thinking of." "Rumors spread quickly here," she said cautiously. "They claim you were involved in the theft." His smirk faded, replaced by a hard edge in his eyes. "Let me guess, they're saying I broke into a merchant's stall, roughed up a guard, and made off with the goods?" She nodded. "Figures," he muttered. "Station security's got nothing to go on, so they pin it on the guy with the bad reputation. Convenient, isn't it?" "Is it true?" she asked, her voice steady. His gaze met hers, unwavering.
"No."
"But I doubt that'll stop people from believing it." She studied him for a long moment. His answer was direct, devoid of theatrics or self-pity. There was a raw honesty to him that she had come to recognize, and it gave her pause. "Why stay, then?" she asked. "Why not leave the station and its suspicions behind?" "Because running doesn't fix anything," he said simply. "And because some things are worth sticking around for." Before she could press him further, a sharp alarm echoed through the station. Lights flickered, and a voice blared over the intercom. "Security alert. Unauthorized access in Cargo Bay 7. All personnel, proceed with caution." Cole was already on his feet. "Stay here," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Ignoring his command, Lyra followed him through the winding corridors toward the cargo bay. When they arrived, the scene was chaotic. A group of armed individuals had barricaded themselves inside, their motives unclear. Security officers were attempting to negotiate, but tensions were high. Amid the commotion, Lyra caught sight of a small figure, a child, cowering behind a crate in the line of fire. Her chest tightened. Cole saw it too. Without hesitation, he moved, slipping past the security perimeter and into the fray. Lyra's heart pounded as she watched him maneuver through the shadows, his movements precise and deliberate. The intruders spotted him, shouting warnings to each other, but Cole didn't falter. He reached the child, scooping them up and shielding them with his body as he darted back towards safety. A shot rang out, narrowly missing him. Lyra held her breath, relief flooding her when he crossed the perimeter unharmed. The child clung to him, trembling but safe. The standoff eventually ended, the intruders subdued by station security. As the dust settled, Cole handed the child to a waiting officer. He turned to leave, but Lyra stepped into his path.
"You didn't have to do that," she said.
"Yeah, I did," he replied. "It was the right thing to do." For a moment, they stood in silence. Then, as if remembering something, Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. He held it out to her, a crude, star-shaped ornament made of scrap metal, its edges smoothed with care. "Figured you might like this," he said. "Call it a Christmas gift." Lyra stared at the ornament, speechless. It was simple, imperfect, but it carried a weight she couldn't quite articulate. Why? She finally asked. Because sometimes a little light goes a long way, he said with a faint smile. He walked away, leaving her holding the gift. As she looked down at the ornament, its dull surface catching the faint glow of the overhead lights, she felt something stir within her, a warmth she had never known. Lyra sat alone in her quarters, the small ornament resting in her palm. Its surface was uneven, the craftsmanship crude, but she couldn't stop staring at it. She traced the edges with her fingers, feeling the effort that had gone into creating it. It was unlike anything she had ever possessed, not because of its material value, but because of its intent. Her people didn't exchange gifts. Altherans considered such gestures unnecessary, even frivolous. Yet here she was, clutching a simple object that felt heavier than anything she had carried before. It was a reminder of the human who had defied every warning, every expectation she had about his kind. The door chimed, breaking her thoughts. When it slid open, Saran stepped inside, his expression unreadable. He noticed the ornament immediately, his gaze narrowing. "What is that?" he asked. Lyra hesitated, then held it up. "A gift." Saran's lips pressed into a thin line. "From the human?" It wasn't a question.
Yes.
He stepped closer, his tone cold. "You have allowed yourself to be compromised. This trinket is evidence of your failure to maintain objectivity. It is unbecoming of an ambassador to indulge in such sentimentality." Her grip tightened around the ornament. "I disagree." Saran's eyes widened slightly at her defiance, but she pressed on, her voice steady. "We have spent centuries observing other species, cataloging their flaws, their weaknesses. Yet we refuse to acknowledge our own. We pride ourselves on logic, but we lack understanding. This," she held up the ornament, "is not weakness. It is connection." For a moment, Saran said nothing. Then he turned away, his tone clipped. "You are allowing emotion to cloud your judgment. Remember your duty, Lyra." When he left, the room felt colder, but Lyra's resolve only grew stronger. She placed the ornament on a small shelf near her workstation, where its simple beauty stood out against the sterile surroundings. The next day, she sought out Cole, finding him near the docking bay where his ship was being prepared for departure. He looked surprised to see her but greeted her with his usual easy smile. "Didn't think I'd see you again before I left," he said. She approached him, standing straighter than usual. "I wanted to thank you." "For the ornament?" he asked.
"For everything," she said.
"You've shown me that my people's perspective is incomplete. We observe, but we do not understand. You've taught me the value of connection, of kindness." Cole rubbed the back of his neck, clearly caught off guard. "I just gave you a little piece of metal. You're giving me way too much credit." "It is not the object itself," she said, her voice soft. "It is the thought behind it. That is what matters." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Well, if that's what you got out of it, then I guess it was worth it." The announcement of his ship's imminent departure crackled over the intercom. He glanced toward the docking bay, then back at her.
"Guess this is goodbye," he said.
"Goodbye for now," she replied. He hesitated, then extended a hand. She looked at it, unfamiliar with the gesture, but placed her hand in his. His grip was firm yet gentle, a silent reassurance. As he walked away, Lyra felt a pang of something she couldn't quite define. Loss, perhaps, but also hope. The ornament now symbolized more than just a gift. It was a promise, a reminder of what she had learned. Returning to her quarters, she placed the ornament on the center of her desk, where it would always catch her eye. The soft glow of the station lights reflected off its surface, casting faint patterns on the wall. For the first time, she didn't feel entirely alone. She vowed to carry this lesson with her, to challenge her people's rigid beliefs and encourage them to see the beauty in imperfection, the strength in connection. As she prepared to document her report, she looked at the ornament once more. It wasn't just a gift. It was a spark, a small but powerful light in the vastness of space. And it had changed everything.